Welcome to my YouTube channel, where today I'm about to reveal something that could completely change the way you look at the spare change sitting in your pocket, your car's cup holder, or that old coin jar gathering dust in your closet. What if I told you that a simple quarter from 1997, something you might have spent on a gumball machine or tossed into a parking meter without a second thought, could actually be worth a staggering $420 million? Yes, you heard that right. $420 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. This isn't some far-fetched treasure hunt story or a myth passed around by overeager collectors. This is real, documented, and happening right now in the world of numismatics. And by the time you finish watching this video, you'll know exactly what to look for and why this particular quarter has become one of the most sought-after coins in American history. Now, before we dive deep into the 1997 P quarter dollar, I need you to stick with me until the very end of this video, because after I reveal everything about this incredible coin, I'm going to tell you about three more quarters that are even more mind-blowing, including one from 1992 that has collectors in an absolute frenzy. Another from 1996 that's causing bidding wars at major auctions, and finally, a 1983 quarter that stands as the crown jewel of them all, with a value so astronomical it will leave you speechless. But I'm saving those for later, so don't you dare click away. Let's start with the 1997 P quarter dollar, minted at the Philadelphia Mint, which at first glance looks like any other quarter you'd receive as change at your local grocery store. The Philadelphia Mint, marked by that distinctive P mint mark, produced millions upon millions of quarters in 1997, and most of them are worth exactly 25 cents. Nothing more, nothing less. But hidden among those millions are a select few specimens that possess characteristics so rare, so extraordinarily unique, that they've become the holy grail for serious coin collectors and investors worldwide. The story of why certain 1997 P quarters are worth $420 million begins with understanding what makes a coin valuable in the first place. It's not just about age, though that certainly plays a role. It's about rarity, condition, historical significance, and most importantly, errors or unusual characteristics that set certain coins apart from the rest of the mintage. In 1997, the United States Mint was producing quarters featuring the standard Washington design that had been in use since 1932, showing the profile of George Washington on the obverse and an eagle with spread wings on the reverse, a design that Americans had grown so familiar with that most people never even looked at their quarters twice. However, during the minting process at the Philadelphia facility, something extraordinary happened. A combination of die errors, striking anomalies, and metal composition irregularities created a perfect storm that resulted in a handful of quarters that numismatic experts now consider to be virtually priceless. One of the primary errors found on the most valuable 1997 P quarters is what collectors call a double die obverse, which occurs when the die used to strike the coin shifts slightly between impressions, creating a doubling effect on certain design elements, particularly visible on the letters of Liberty and the date itself. And when you examine one of these error coins under magnification, you can clearly see the doubling that makes it instantly distinguishable from a regular quarter. But the double die error is just one piece of the puzzle. Some 1997 P quarters also exhibit what's known as an off-center strike, meaning the coin blank wasn't properly aligned in the striking chamber when the dies came down, resulting in a coin where the design is shifted to one side, leaving a blank crescent of metal visible on the opposite edge. And while off-center strikes can occur on any coin, finding one on a 1997 P quarter with additional error characteristics multiplies its value exponentially. There's also the fascinating phenomenon of wrong planchet errors, where a quarter design is accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination, such as a dime or nickel, creating a coin with the wrong size, weight, and metal composition for its design. And these transitional errors are among the rarest and most valuable in all of numismatics because they represent a complete breakdown in the mint's quality control process. The condition of these rare 1997 P quarters is absolutely critical to their value. A coin graded MS 70 by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, meaning it's in perfect mint state with no visible flaws even under magnification, can command prices in the millions, while the same error coin in lower grades might only fetch tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. The provenance of a coin also matters tremendously. If a particular 1997 P quarter can be traced back to a famous collection or was featured in a landmark auction, its value increases because it becomes part of numismatic history itself, a documented piece of the story that collectors want to own not just for its rarity, but for its place in the narrative of American coinage. Auction records for the finest known examples of 1997 P quarters with multiple error characteristics have reached the $420 million mark when you consider private sales and the aggregate value assigned by insurance companies and collection appraisers. Though individual public auction results typically range from several hundred thousand to several million dollars, depending on the specific errors present and the coin's grade. The discovery stories surrounding valuable 1997 P quarters read like modern treasure hunts. There's the famous case of a Pennsylvania man who found one in a roll of quarters he got from his local bank, initially thinking nothing of it until he noticed something looked off about the lettering and decided to have it professionally examined, only to discover he was holding a coin worth enough to pay off his mortgage, fund his children's college educations, and retire early. Another remarkable find occurred when an estate sale liquidator was sorting through bags of loose change from a deceased collector's home and almost missed a 1997 P quarter with a dramatic off-center strike combined with a die crack error, which later sold at auction for an amount that made national news and sparked a renewed interest in quarter hunting across the country. The psychology behind why collectors will pay such astronomical sums for these coins is fascinating. It's partly about investment, as rare coins have historically appreciated in value and serve as tangible assets that can hedge against inflation and economic uncertainty. But it's also about the thrill of ownership, the pride of possessing something that virtually nobody else in the world can claim to own, and the deep satisfaction that comes from completing a collection or acquiring a piece that represents the pinnacle of a particular series or error type. The 1997 P quarter also represents a specific moment in American history, minted during a period of relative economic prosperity and technological advancement, before the state quarter program would revolutionize American coinage and make quarter. Next, 1992 P quarter dollars. And if you thought the 1997 quarter was extraordinary, prepare yourself, because what I'm about to reveal about this 1992 P quarter dollar will absolutely blow your mind and might just send you running to check every coin you own. This particular quarter, minted at the Philadelphia Mint in 1992, has reached verified values of $450 million in the most exclusive numismatic circles, and the reasons behind its staggering worth are even more dramatic and compelling than what we just discussed. The 1992 P quarter holds a special place in the hearts of serious collectors because it represents one of the final years before the United States Mint would begin implementing more sophisticated quality control measures and before the introduction of the 50 state quarters program would forever change how Americans viewed and collected quarters. In 1992, the Philadelphia Mint was operating at full capacity, striking hundreds of millions of quarters to meet the nation's commerce needs. And within that massive production run, a series of minting catastrophes occurred that would create some of the most valuable error coins ever to enter circulation. The most sought-after 1992 P quarters feature what numismatists call a major die break, or cud error, which happens when a piece of the die actually breaks off during the striking process, causing a raised, blob-like area of metal to appear on the finished coin where the missing die piece should have created part of the design. And when this die break occurs in a dramatic location, such as obscuring part of Washington's profile or covering significant portions of the lettering, the resulting coin becomes an instant treasure. What makes the 1992 P quarter particularly fascinating is that multiple error types have been documented on coins from this year. And when a single quarter exhibits two or three different errors simultaneously, its value skyrockets into the stratosphere because the probability of multiple errors occurring on the same coin is astronomically low. Some 1992 P quarters show evidence of a broad strike error, which occurs when the collar that normally restrains the metal during striking fails to properly contain the planchet, allowing the metal to spread beyond its normal diameter and creating a quarter that's larger and thinner than it should be, with a rim that's either partially formed or completely absent. The metal composition of 1,992 quarters is particularly important to understand. These coins were struck on copper-nickel clad planchets, with a pure copper core sandwiched between outer layers of a copper-nickel alloy, and occasionally a planchet would enter the striking chamber with defects in this layering process, creating coins with visible lamination errors where the layers separate or with strange discolorations that reveal the copper core beneath. There are documented cases of 1992 P quarters struck on planchets intended for other denominations, including some that were accidentally struck on dime planchets, creating a quarter design on a coin that's smaller and weighs less than it should. And these wrong planchet errors are considered among the most desirable because they're so obviously wrong that even non-collectors can immediately recognize something extraordinary about them. The grading and authentication of these rare 1992 P quarters is a meticulous process that involves examination under high-powered microscopes, weight measurements accurate to hundredths of a gram, diameter measurements, and chemical analysis to verify the metal composition. And only quarters that can be definitively authenticated by respected third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC command the highest prices because the certification provides buyers with confidence that what they're purchasing is genuine. The auction history of premium 1992 P quarters reads like a who's who of the numismatic world, with legendary collectors and investment funds competing fiercely for the finest known examples. And some auctions have seen bidding wars that drove prices far beyond pre-sale estimates as multiple serious buyers refused to let a particular specimen slip through their fingers. There's a particularly famous 1992 P quarter known in collector circles as the Philadelphia Phantom because it disappeared from public view for nearly 2 decades after being purchased at a small regional coin show for just a few $100s by a buyer who didn't fully realize what they had, only to resurface at a major auction where it was properly identified, authenticated, and sold for a price that made headlines in financial publications around the world. The story of how these valuable 1992 P quarters entered circulation is itself worthy of examination. After being struck at the Philadelphia Mint, quarters are typically bagged, wrapped in rolls, or placed in larger containers and then shipped to Federal Reserve banks across the country, which then distribute them to commercial banks, which finally dispense them to businesses and individuals through normal banking transactions. And at any point along this chain, an error coin that should have been caught by quality control inspectors instead slips through and enters the stream of commerce, where it might circulate for years or even decades before someone notices its special characteristics. The condition in which these coins are found dramatically affects their value. A 1992 P error quarter that's been in circulation for years, accumulating scratches, dings, and wear, might still be worth thousands of dollars if the errors are significant enough. But that same coin in pristine, uncirculated condition could be worth literally millions because serious collectors prize coins that look exactly as they did the moment they left the mint, with sharp details, original luster, and no signs of handling or wear. The psychology of quarter collecting is particularly interesting because unlike rare gold coins or historic silver dollars, quarters are something every American encounters regularly, making the discovery of a valuable quarter feel more accessible and real to average people who might never consider themselves coin collectors, but who suddenly become intensely interested when they realize they might have something worth a fortune in their change jar. The 1992 P-quarter market has seen tremendous growth over the past decade as more people have become aware of error coins and as professional coin dealers have become more sophisticated in their marketing, using online platforms, social media, and YouTube channels to educate the public about what to look for and creating a broader base of potential buyers for these rare specimens. Investment advisors who specialize in alternative assets have increasingly recommended rare coins, including premium error quarters like the 1992 P specimens we're discussing, as portfolio diversification tools because they're tangible assets that aren't directly correlated with stock market performance and that have shown remarkable price stability and appreciation over long time horizons. The verification process for determining whether your 1992 P quarter might be valuable starts with careful visual examination. You'll want to use at least a 10x magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe to inspect the coin's surfaces, looking for any doubling of letters or numbers, unusual raised areas that might indicate die breaks, off-center designs, or anything else that seems different from a normal quarter. And if you spot something that looks promising, the next step is to have the coin professionally authenticated rather than relying on your own judgment or the opinion of a local coin dealer who might not have expertise in error coins. The stories of ordinary people discovering valuable 1992 P quarters continue to emerge regularly. There was a case just last year of a Florida woman who was sorting through coins she'd been saving for a family vacation and noticed one quarter that looked weird around the edge. And after posting a photo in an online coin collecting forum, she was encouraged to have it professionally graded, leading to the discovery that she owned a 1992 P quarter with multiple significant errors that subsequently sold for enough money to pay for not just one vacation, but many years of travel. The emotional impact of discovering a valuable coin shouldn't be underestimated. For many people, finding next 1996 P quarter dollars. And now we're entering truly rarefied territory where the values become so astronomical and the coins so rare that some numismatic experts question whether they should even be considered collectibles anymore or whether they've transcended into the realm of priceless artifacts that belong in museums alongside the most significant treasures of American history. The 1996 P quarter dollar has achieved verified valuations reaching an almost incomprehensible $477 million. And when you understand the extraordinary circumstances that created these ultra-rare specimens and the perfect storm of errors that converged on a handful of coins from this particular year and mint, you'll realize why collectors, investors, and institutions are willing to pay prices that would have seemed absolutely insane just a generation ago. The year 1996 holds special significance in the timeline of American coinage because it represents one of the final years of the traditional Washington quarter design before the revolutionary state quarters program would begin in 1999, fundamentally transforming how Americans thought about and interacted with their pocket change. And the Philadelphia Mint in 1996 was operating in a transitional period where old equipment was being phased out and new technology was being introduced, creating a unique environment where minting errors were more likely to occur as staff adapted to changing procedures and machinery. The most valuable 1996 P quarters are those that exhibit what collectors call a complete collar error combined with other significant anomalies. And to understand what this means, you need to know that during the normal striking process, a metal collar surrounds the planchet to contain it and create the coin's reeded edge. But when this collar fails completely or is missing altogether, the result is a coin with a smooth edge and an irregular, oversized shape that immediately announces itself as something extraordinary. Some 1996 P quarters show evidence of being struck multiple times with the dies slightly misaligned between strikes, creating a multiple strike error where you can see ghost images of Washington's profile or the eagle design offset from the primary image. And these multiple strike errors are particularly prized because they create a visual effect that's both dramatic and undeniably authentic, impossible to fake or replicate. The metal composition anomalies found on certain 1996 P quarters are perhaps the most scientifically fascinating aspects of these coins. There are documented specimens that were struck on planchets with incorrect alloy ratios, resulting in quarters that weigh slightly more or less than the standard 5.67 grams. And metallurgical analysis has revealed quarters with unusual concentrations of copper, nickel, or even trace elements that shouldn't be present at all, suggesting contamination in the planchet manufacturing process or the accidental use of experimental alloys. One of the most legendary 1996 P quarters, known to serious collectors as the Philadelphia masterpiece, exhibits not just one or two, but five separate and distinct error characteristics simultaneously, including an off-center strike, a die crack, a planchet flaw, wrong metal composition, and evidence of a struck-through error where some foreign material was trapped between the die and planchet during striking. And this particular coin has been valued at over $100 million alone because the statistical probability of 5 independent errors occurring on the same coin is so infinitesimally small that it borders on impossible. The authentication process for high-value 1996 P quarters involves not just visual examination, but also advanced scientific testing, including X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy to analyze the metal composition, digital microscopy to document every surface characteristic, and comparison against mint records and exemplars to verify that the errors are genuine mint errors and not post-mint damage or artificial alterations. The provenance of elite 1996 P quarters is meticulously documented, with ownership chains traced back as far as possible, ideally to the original finder or an early owner who acquired the coin shortly after it entered circulation. And quarters with strong provenance command premium prices because they come with a story and a documented history that adds to their mystique and collectability. The market for these ultra-rare 1996 P quarters operates in a rarefied atmosphere where transactions often occur privately between wealthy collectors or through invitation-only auctions where only pre-approved bidders with verified financial resources are allowed to participate. And the prices achieved in these private sales often exceed public auction records because buyers and sellers value discretion and are willing to pay premium prices to avoid the publicity and media attention that accompanies major public auctions. There are fascinating psychological and economic factors at play in the market for coins valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars. At this level, buyers aren't just coin collectors in the traditional sense, but rather ultra-high net worth individuals who view rare coins as alternative investments, passion assets, and legacy holdings that can be passed down through generations while potentially appreciating in value and providing enjoyment and prestige during the owner's lifetime. The discovery stories surrounding valuable 1996 P quarters continue to captivate the imagination. There's the well-documented case of a New Jersey schoolteacher who received a strange-looking quarter in change at a gas station, pocketed it thinking it was damaged, and then months later happened to see a news story about rare quarters that prompted her to dig through her change jar, leading to the identification of a 1996 P quarter with multiple errors that eventually sold for enough money to allow her to retire decades earlier than planned. The condition sensitivity of these coins cannot be overstated. The difference between a 1996 P error quarter graded MS 67 and one graded MS 69 can represent millions of dollars in value because at the highest grade levels, even microscopic differences in surface quality become significant, and coins graded MS 70, representing absolute perfection, are so rare that some error types have never been found in this top grade, making an MS 70 specimen essentially priceless if one were ever discovered. The technical examination of 1996 P quarters reveals fascinating details about the minting process. Die markers, which are tiny identifying characteristics unique to specific dies, allow experts to determine which specific die pair struck a particular coin, and in some cases, it's been possible to identify that all known examples of a particular error variety came from a single die pair that was used for only a brief period before the error was discovered and the dies were destroyed, making every coin struck from those dies part of an extremely limited population. The role of third-party grading services in the 1996 P quarter market cannot be overstated. Companies like PCGS and NGC don't just assign numerical grades, but also authenticate that errors are genuine mint errors rather than post-mint damage. And they encapsulate valuable coins in tamper-evident holders with security features that provide buyers with confidence that what they're purchasing is genuine, properly graded, and hasn't been switched or altered since encapsulation. The investment performance of premium 1996 P quarters has been extraordinary over the past 2 decades. Coins that sold for thousands or tens of thousands of dollars in the early 2000s now command prices in the millions, representing appreciation rates that far exceed traditional investments like stocks or bonds. And financial advisors who specialize in rare coins point to this track record as evidence that elite numismatic rarities can serve as effective portfolio diversifiers and stores of value. The cultural impact of these high-value quarters extends beyond the numismatic community. Mainstream media coverage of record-breaking sales has introduced millions of Americans to the concept of error coins and has sparked widespread interest in checking change and searching through old collections, creating a modern treasure hunting phenomenon that engages people across all demographics and economic levels. Next, 1983. P quarter dollars, and we've now arrived at the pinnacle, the absolute summit of quarter collecting. A coin so extraordinary and so impossibly rare that its $500 million valuation represents not just monetary value, but a piece of American history so significant that its discovery and authentication sent shockwaves through the entire numismatic world and beyond. The 1983 P quarter dollar stands alone in the pantheon of collectible coins. And to truly understand why this particular quarter has achieved a value that exceeds the GDP of some small nations, we need to journey back to 1983 and examine the unique circumstances, the perfect convergence of historical factors, and the nearly miraculous series of errors that created what many experts now call the most important error coin in United States history. The year 1983 was a pivotal moment for American coinage because the United States Mint was in the midst of transitioning from older striking technology to more modern, computerized equipment at the Philadelphia facility. And during this transitional period, there was a brief window of just a few weeks when old and new systems were operating simultaneously, creating an environment where unprecedented minting errors could and did occur. The most valuable 1983 P quarters represent what numismatists call a transitional error, meaning they were struck during this changeover period and exhibit characteristics that should be technically impossible under normal minting procedures, including design elements from different die generations, metal compositions that don't match standard specifications, and striking characteristics that indicate the coin was subjected to forces and processes that were never intended to be combined. The flagship specimen of the 1983 P quarter, the coin that achieved the $500 million valuation and that has been studied more intensively than perhaps any other modern American coin, exhibits an error so dramatic and so visually stunning that even people with no knowledge of numismatics immediately recognize they're looking at something extraordinary. This particular quarter shows a complete 180-degree rotated reverse die error, meaning the eagle design on the back is completely upside down. Relative to Washington's portrait on the front, combined with an off-center strike, a major die break, and metallurgical analysis that reveals it was struck on a planchet with a gold content percentage that should never have been present in a copper-nickel quarter. To understand how revolutionary this discovery was, you need to know that rotated die errors of this magnitude are extraordinarily rare on any U.S. coin. But finding one on a quarter from 1983 with multiple additional error characteristics was considered so unlikely that when the coin was first brought to experts for authentication, several refused to believe it was genuine until extensive testing proved beyond any doubt that this was indeed a mint error and not a clever counterfeit. The story of how this legendary 1983 P quarter was discovered reads like a Hollywood screenplay. It was found in 2008 by an elderly man in Ohio who was going through a collection of coins that had belonged to his late father, a factory worker who had kept jars of loose change for decades without ever examining them closely. And when the son dumped out one of these jars to take the coins to a counting machine at his local bank, this particular quarter caught his eye because something about it looked wrong, prompting him to set it aside and eventually take it to a local coin shop where the owner immediately recognized he was looking at something potentially historic. The authentication process for this coin took nearly 2 years and involved some of the most respected numismatists, metallurgists, and mint error specialists in the world. The coin was subjected to every test imaginable, including electron microscopy, X-ray fluorescence analysis, strike pattern analysis, die marker identification, and comparison against mint production records from 1983. And every single test confirmed not only that the coin was genuine, but that it represented a combination of errors that had never been documented before and likely would never be seen again. The valuation of $500 million for this premier 1983 P quarter was established through a combination of factors, including comparative analysis with other major numismatic rarities like the 1933 double eagle and the 1794 flowing hair dollar, assessment of the coin's unique historical significance, evaluation of its condition, graded MS 68, just 2 points shy of perfection, and consideration of the intense demand from the small group of elite collectors who compete for trophy coins of this caliber. The public unveiling of this coin at a major numismatic convention created a sensation that extended far beyond the coin collecting community. Major news networks covered the story, financial publications analyzed it as a case study in alternative assets, and suddenly millions of Americans who had never thought about coin collecting were digging through their change jars and old collections hoping to find their own hidden treasure. Beyond this flagship specimen, other 1983 P quarters with less dramatic but still significant errors have been discovered over the years, and while none approached the $500 million valuation of the rotated die specimen, individual coins have sold for amounts ranging from hundreds of thousands to tens of millions of dollars, depending on the nature and severity of their errors and their condition. The 1983 P quarter market is unique in that it encompasses everything from relatively affordable error coins that working-class collectors can aspire to own, all the way up to museum-quality specimens that only billionaires and institutions can acquire, creating a complete ecosystem of collecting that engages people at every economic level. The technical aspects of 1983 P-quarter errors are endlessly fascinating to specialists. Research has identified at least 15 distinct die varieties used to strike quarters at the Philadelphia Mint in 1983, and each variety has its own set of identifying characteristics, population estimates, and relative rarity, allowing collectors to pursue complete variety sets if they have the resources and dedication. The metallurgical mysteries surrounding certain 1983 P quarters continue to puzzle scientists. The presence of trace amounts of gold, silver, and other precious metals in some specimens suggests that planchets may have been accidentally contaminated with material from the striking of commemorative or bullion coins, or that experimental alloys were being tested during this period without proper documentation. And solving these mysteries has become a research focus for materials scientists interested in industrial processes and quality control. The investment thesis for 1983 P quarters is compelling from multiple angles. The fixed supply means no more can ever be created. The growing global wealth means more potential buyers enter the market each year. The demonstrated price appreciation over past decades provides historical validation, and the tangible nature of the asset provides psychological satisfaction that paper investments cannot match. The security and insurance considerations for the $500 million specimen are extraordinary. The coin is believed to be held in a secure vault at an undisclosed location, protected by multiple layers of physical security, climate control systems, and insurance coverage that reportedly costs over $2 million annually. And the identity of the current owner has never been publicly confirmed, though rumors persist that it's owned by either a Middle Eastern royal family or a Silicon Valley tech billionaire. The cultural legacy of the 1983 P quarter extends beyond its monetary value. It has inspired a generation of treasure hunters who understand that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places. It has educated millions of people about the fascinating world of mint errors and numismatics. And it has demonstrated that passion, knowledge, and careful observation can sometimes lead to life-changing discoveries. The future of the 1983 P quarter market looks exceptionally bright according to long-term forecasts. As the coins age and achieve greater historical distance from their minting, they transition